The one thing that I'd like to presence here is I know that it feels like there isn't any other way, like whatever we've been doing so far is what works the best. But I do encourage you all to try to experiment, once a quarter with something new and see how that changes.
Welcome to Supernormalized, the podcast where we challenge the conventional, break boundaries, and normalize the seemingly supernatural. Join me, CJ, as we explore less uncharted realms of existence and unravel the mysteries of life experience. My treasured listeners, if you have a life story or healing modality or unique knowledge that you'd love to share, reach out to me at Supernormalized, that's Supernormalized with a Z, at proton.me. Let's together embrace acceptance of the supernatural and unusual as what it really is, completely normal. Today on Supernormalized, I have Jassy Jackson. Jassy is not just another voice in the world of spirituality. She's a beacon of light guiding souls toward their higher selves. With her experience as a seasoned host of the Beyond Meditation podcast and now launching the Sacred Arts podcast, Jassy delves deep into the realms of consciousness, healing, and spiritual awakening. Her vision is to create a brighter, more peaceful future where individuals can live in the present moment free from guilt and worry. Jassy's dream is to equip everyone with transformative tools that lead to a life brimming with joy and fulfillment. With a Master's of Science in Psychology and 15 years of leadership experience, Jassy combines academic knowledge with hands-on spiritual guidance. As a Master Reiki practitioner and trained Shaman, she brings expertise in energy healing and divination. Each session with Jassy is a step closer to tapping one's innate power and navigating the intricate journey of spiritual awakening. Jassy not only offers insights, but also provides a compass for those seeking to illuminate their path. And now it's time to empower, dear listeners, with the genuine, transformative knowledge that Jassy has to present. Please enjoy. Welcome to Supernormalized, Jassy Jackson. Jassy, you've been doing healing with people using ancient wisdom and ancient techniques. You're a Master's of Science in Psychology for over 15 years. How did you come to all this?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So, I was just living my life trying to check off all the boxes and do what I was told, what I was taught in school, what my parents and my siblings and, my family taught me in terms of like their expectations and things like that. And I finally had a breakdown where I wasn't really listening to my inner self. I wasn't really following my own guidance. And, like a lot of people out there, when I hear their story, it's so similar to mine, where something had to give. I had fibromyalgia since I was 15. I was in constant pain and it got worse and worse. The more boxes I checked off in terms of corporate America and all my goals and how much money I wanted to make and having a husband and the house and all of those things, I would check those things off and I was deeper and deeper, more depressed. And so one day I had this breakdown. I had a friend, actually, a coworker, who once told me about his experience in rehab, in getting Reiki. And I thought, you know what? I will try anything at this point because I was in therapy for a very long time before that. And I went and tried Reiki, and that was kind of like my introduction back into these rituals or these energetic healings that I once was dabbling with as a teenager, but then I had forgotten about it. And, once I had that first Reiki session, I was walking that path moving forward.
Right. So you had all this trouble with your body, and did it seem like as you became more separate from spirit in certain ways that was manifesting, or how was that manifesting for you? Did you have any connection
Um,
there?
yeah, absolutely. The more and more I was separated, because I remember like in my early 20s,
Mm.
I had rejected God. I was so angry and
Ah,
I was rejecting my intuition. Like, no, I'm literally just going to, find a job, do the school thing. And I was really separated from my spirituality and the things that I believed in. And the
yeah,
more I did that, the more and more the universe was showing me that it was the incorrect decision. I had 3 accidents in the span of 2 weeks. I just had the darnest luck. Like, I just had really bad luck. Things were not going my way. And then later on, like maybe 5 or 6 years later, after trying to fit this square peg into a round hole, I finally started to be a little bit more open to meditation, a little bit more open to prayer again. And I think that that's when things started. I didn't realize like that the goal wasn't to make things easier. The goal was more into like, okay, some of these things aren't working. Let me go back into some of my old practices or the ways that I was taught from an ancient wisdom perspective. And those things were coming to fruition. But then it wasn't until, and then the other thing that was happening was like my pain in my body. They say the body keeps the score. The pain in my body was amplifying. So the more and more I was ignoring that part of myself, the more and more my body was saying, like, hey, something's missing here, something, you're not going down the right path.
yeah, right. So it's trying to tell you a story, and it was doing all it can to get your attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it got your attention, and you pivoted and started a new life path.
Yeah, I started to look at the signs more deeply. Like, I mean, my coworker didn't mention that to anybody else. He decided to come into my office one day and decided to share his Reiki experience with me. And I saw that as a sign and I started to pay attention a little bit more, like what is coming into my consciousness at this time, right?
Yeah.
What is it that people are telling me? Like, let me zone into that and maybe try it. I started to experiment a little bit more because not all modalities were for me.
Mm.
uh, I started off with Reiki, but then I went off and did breath work and I did yoga. Yoga was definitely not for me. And I tried a whole lot of different things. And then I just, I looked to see what actually was best for my soul and my body.
Right, right. So you found another way to get messages from the universe, basically by starting to listen and trying the things out which were being presented to you. I can understand that myself. I went through a stage there where I was grossly overweight and I couldn't find an answer. And I do a bit of work with planetary energies, and I called out to Mars and I said, "Help me, Mars," because I wanted to get pushed along. And what was put in front of me was this technique of fasting, and it made a lot of sense. And I did it, and I lost 18 kilos really, really quickly. And it just changed me. Like, I literally transformed in, what, 6 weeks? And everyone around
Wow.
me said, "What happened to you?" And I said, "This is what happened." And but I actually had to listen to get that because, I didn't notice. I wasn't looking for it, but that's the way it presented itself. It actually presented itself as a little ad on the corner or something presented to me in something, and I pressed on it and went to it, and I read it and went, wow, that makes sense. And I
Yeah.
tried it, and it basically reset my body and stopped that, bad habit cycle. So yeah, I get that, how the universe, I think, actually, or I don't know what to call it, whatever it is that's guiding us does reach out to us and gives us options and offers, and it's a matter of us picking up those and running with them and doing it the right way.
Yeah, a lot of us are so stuck in our 3D lives, right? Because I think that in the 3D world, we're so ingrained in like checking off those boxes and doing what we need to do and suffering through it. And I'm doing
Yeah.
air quotes because we actually do have choices. We don't
Yes.
have to suffer. There are certain situations where we have to feel the pain. We have to go through some sort of tumultuous awakening or whatever the case may be, right? There is grief, there is sadness, but we don't have to stay there.
That's
We
true.
don't have to feel that stuck because there are so many different choices out there. And I think that that's the difference between, they call it like elevating into 4D or 5D, even. For those of us that are in 3D, we're all suffering and we don't even know it. And we
Yeah.
have this wound that we're like so afraid to like look at it. And then when we start to like elevate into 4D, and then there's different levels of 4D, right? We then start to say, aha, I'm suffering. Let me look at this wound. Let me call out to Mars or the universe or whatever and figure out how to work through this pain and this wounding, which is, I think, really incredible. And I think a lot of people are coming out of that 3D and into that 4D stage.
Definitely. It seems like there's when you're really caught deeply in materialism, it seems like life is almost robotic and mechanical. And sometimes it can actually lock you into a path where you think there is no choice.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's hard to even see a choice. I mean, I know myself when I had depression and anxiety way back when I was younger. I didn't see any choices out, and at that time, but there was choices. They did come, and I was able to recognize them, and it did pull me out of that stark materialism into more of a faith-based sort of understanding of the world, and that faith was more like animism for myself at the time, and it made a lot of sense. I was like, okay, so there is other ways, and the universe is reaching out to me, and I can actually grab those threads and run with them if I choose to. And I think, yeah, that is that stepping from that 3D to the 4D. So yeah, very cool. What happened then for you after you started on your new path?
Yeah, I kept my corporate job. I think that a lot of people are all about like it's all or nothing type of thing. But what I like to tell a lot of people that are looking to like shift careers or shift um from one thing to another, there has to be like an easiness out of it, right? And so I'm very practical, I'm very science based in a lot of the things that I do. And so I just started really healing myself
Yeah.
and looking trying to be open. So that was the thing, because I'm so stubborn and I'm so kind of set in my ways, and I know this about myself. I really started doing like cacao ceremonies in the morning where I would open up my heart and ask for guidance, ask for to heal what needs to be healed. And then I would be
Mm.
presented all these opportunities on whether, finding a new Reiki person, to breath work, to yoga again, right? And sound baths and things like that. And so I started trying all these different things and really seeing what landed for me. Some things weren't for me, and some things absolutely I still practice today and became part of my everyday life.
Mm.
And then the more and more deeper I got into it, I started realizing like, hey, I actually want to try and see what it would be like to be a Reiki practitioner. And so I asked my Reiki master at the time to teach me level one, level two. And then eventually a year later, I became a master. And then the pandemic rolled around and more people were looking for this kind of thing. And my intention was not to open a business. My intention was just to have this practice so that I can offer it to people when the opportunity arises or when somebody needed it. And it turned out during the pandemic, a lot of people needed it. And I started getting referrals from friends and family, and then it became strangers. And so then I decided to open up a little spot. One, because my husband wasn't comfortable with people entering our home during the pandemic. And two, because it gave me the opportunity to balance my work that I love in corporate America along with the spiritual side. And so I think for me, what I've learned over the years, it's not an all or nothing type of thing. It's really an opportunity to be able to balance myself in the 3D world and bring in income and be able to support my family, along with being able to give back to my community.
Brilliant, brilliant. So you've developed these skills over time and discovered that you have a passion also for helping people and taking them on their journey towards more, what would you say, like an open heart and balanced sort of life. Have you found that it becomes easier and easier over time with people because your skills just keep on increasing?
I think it's different because the way that I carry my practice and the fact that I offer so many modalities, my education in psychology, I bring in things like cognitive behavioral psychology, I bring in things like transformational psychology as well, and mindfulness, and with Reiki, and now my shamanism, my shamanic practices. It really is a case by case thing. I also have a lot of experience in suicide prevention. And so I tend to attract a lot of people that are not necessarily looking for the balance, or not necessarily looking to open their
Ah,
heart, but they
yeah,
really are in the depth of seeking help, and they're coming to me because they're at the end of their options. They'll
yeah,
At this
right.
point they'll try anything, right? Which is where I was. And so
Okay.
a lot of it, I would say it is easy for me because then I can pinpoint, like, this is what's going to help them and this is what's going to speak to them. I try to learn their cosmology, try to learn where they're at in their lives, try to see where it is, try to accept them for where they're at in their developmental stage. And then from there, I proceed in, like, okay, well, you've never tried any energy healing. So I'm not going to jump into like full on shamanic practices because that might scare them away. But if they're willing to try something new, then I start off with Reiki, because Reiki, really all you do is just lay there, be open. I start off with a beautiful grounding meditation, which is something that everybody can do. And then I do the energy work, and, they're able to experience things for themselves. Whereas somebody that's really deep seated and has, they've gone to psychics and they've done the tarot and they've tried all these things. Maybe I'll try some of my shamanic wisdom. And then also, depending on their own cosmology, I get a lot of people in the Hispanic community because I am Latina, right? There are certain things in our own culture that maybe be taboo in the 3D world, but they're open to now tapping into their own heritage and their own ancient wisdom.
Yeah, right, right. So you meet people at their level, so then you can actually, yeah, help them along without them freaking out. That's a good point. And yeah, it's good that you're wise to that. I mean, it does make your job a lot easier in the end. So, what was the catalyst that propelled you into the world of spirituality and energy healing? I mean, you had your own process there, but when you started working with people and finding your way, did something just click with you and you said, and you thought, well, that's it, I'm giving up the corporate life, I'm doing this?
Yeah. At some point, I did think I was going to give up my corporate life. And then when I would start to romanticize that or fantasize about it, I would miss it.
Mm.
A lot of the times, I fantasize about, like, oh, I wish I could just go and live in the forest, and I romanticize that. I'm like, well, but now
I
I
do that.
miss my life here. And so I really discovered that it's all about balance, because before, in my old life, I was giving 15, 18 hours a day to my corporate life. And I decided, and I think that that's why I wanted to run away from it. But then when I started to do the Reiki and the shamanic practices and seeing people and helping people a lot more, I found myself really missing the 3D life and the corporate life. And also, allowing myself to be in the corporate life allows me to empathize and understand my clients a lot better. I'm not at the point yet where if I were to do this 100% of the time, I would still be able to empathize. I think having this balance between both really allows me to live a more holistic life. The one thing that I did do and put out into the universe was that I wanted to have a lot more structure and boundaries around my corporate life, and be there when and be fully present when I needed to be there, and be totally enthralled in that, but for the set amount of time, like the 40 hours a week. And then the other, 20 to 30 hours a week being fully present and enthralled in my community and being able to provide these services.
Yeah, it sounds like. I mean, I've recognised before that shamans are a bridge to both worlds, and be able to step between both worlds gives you that understanding of what's happening in both worlds. So then that way you can actually service the community even better because you know what people go through. You are a human, but you also have a spirituality that does sort of set you apart from others because you recognize everything. You can see everything. Have that sort of broad vision helps a lot, I think, for sure. Yeah. So, okay. So you've had some podcast. You've actually hosted some podcasts as well, and one of them was the Beyond Meditation podcast. What did you actually discover in that, which are like common misconceptions about meditation? Because I actually find that when I try and tell, like, people are saying, I need to do something about my life, I say, try meditation. I can't do it, and they always say, my monkey mind, I can't stop the monkey mind. I said, well, I used to have the monkey mind, but I stopped mine by just stopping. And and I found stopping quite easily. And when I meditate, I say, okay, I'm going to go in between, because I'm going in between all that stuff, and that's when you drop away and you have the space. What are the misconceptions you found?
Yeah, I think that the main misconception, which was my own misconception, is that what meditation looks like. To me, it looked like sitting cross-legged on the
Oh
floor,
yeah.
closing your eyes and just letting your thoughts float away. And I couldn't do that. Like, my mind was so wired and so worried about the past, so worried about the future, so worried about that conversation I had the other day. And did I say the right thing? Did I disappoint this person? Am I, and I just couldn't do it. And so I gave up. But then after doing the Reiki and really trying different things, like being open to experimenting, is really what led into understanding that that's not what meditation is. And then even doing the podcast too, doing a lot of the research, talking to different people. Meditation could look as simple as going and taking a walk and just being in the present moment and looking at every flower, every tree, every leaf. Meditation, I mean, my husband calls his golf game meditation, and it really is,
It is.
because all we're doing is chasing a ball and looking at, like, where did my ball go? Where did my ball go? Where did my ball go? Okay,
Yeah,
what do I like? You're not thinking about anything else but that present moment,
that's right.
right?
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it can look like chopping, onions or carrots in your kitchen, like literally slivering each section of that vegetable, and being in that present moment. It's about letting go of the past, letting go of the future. And one of the greatest things that I found was, like, okay, I'm thinking about the future right now. I'm thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow because I have this podcast. And what am I going to say? It's like, okay, brain, do I need to think about this right now? The answer is often no. And then
Yeah.
I would just make a mental note, or I would write it down, like, okay, I can think about this tomorrow, like 30 minutes before that podcast or something like that. And that would really help my brain kind of ease out of that. And then it's all about coming back to that present moment, and without having to be like, okay, I'm going to purposely, like, just empty my mind and push away my thoughts. The more you try to do that, I think the more thoughts come in.
Yes.
But if you change your perspective, or you change the goal just a little bit, you're actually able to accomplish that. And I think that that's the biggest thing that I learned from that podcast, and looking at all the modalities and looking at different ways and discussing it with a variety of different people, and how they actually achieve that.
Yeah, a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about meditation, and I used to paint to meditate. That was one of the things I did as a meditation practice, and because when you're painting, you're like, all you're doing is focus on the painting and how it all comes out. And I would do what I'd call subconscious painting. So I'm not actually trying to paint a figurative object. It was always abstract, and I'd be like, oh, this is where this color's got to go, and I've got to do that shape, and I've got to do it this way, and all this sort of stuff. And I just channel paint, and it was really a lot of fun. So yeah, there is different ways to meditate, and it's definitely something that we all should do. I think. I mean, there is a famous Zen saying, which is chop wood and carry water before enlightenment. Then after enlightenment, chop wood and carry water, because it's all a part of being here. Now, modern anxieties. In today's fast-paced world, anxiety seems to be a common ailment. And how do ancient healing practices provide relief in this modern context?
Yeah, I had a really great teacher and therapist that used to say, anxiety is when you're living in the future, depression is when you're living in the past.
Oh
And
yeah, that's good.
it really gave me a perspective on that. And it's like, whoa, And when I would start to feel depressed, I would then look at like my thoughts, and it's like, oh yeah, I am thinking a lot about the past and like things that happened in the past. Or when I'd be like, what is this like? Why is my heart like beating really fast? Why am I feeling short of breath? And it's like, oh, I'm really anxious right now. Oh, I'm really looking into the future. And we can't predict what the future is. Things might be on our calendar, but we don't know if they're actually going to happen. We don't know how things are going to shake out. And so I know it's really hard to kind of let go of those type of thoughts, but I really try to come back to the present. And so when somebody comes to me with anxiety, the first thing we talk about is like, what is going on right now? What is happening in your life? What who are you taking care of? Who are you focused on? Are you people pleasing? Are you worried about what people are telling or thinking about you, or how they're going to react? I really look at what is taking up most of their thoughts, and then we start to reframe that, and we start to look at more mindfulness around that. And then, I go ahead and do the energy healing, which is clearing out a lot of those cords that might be attached to other people. We start to look at different energy structures in terms of like what needs to be cleared out, what needs to heal within your aura as well. And I find that once we do that energy clearing and we remove those cords and we start to heal the aura, people start to come back to themselves and start to realize like, wow, that anxiety wasn't mine, or wow, I really have been just riddled with all of these things from the future. And they start to come back to the present moment and back into themselves. So I think that
Mm.
the answer really is about looking at, where does this dialogue come from? Where do these expectations come from and these limiting beliefs? And start to kind of heal some of that. It doesn't all happen in one session, but I will say there's a lot of leaps and bounds that happens when you do decide to have that energy healing, or start to kind of repair some of those energetic ailments.
Mm. Do you use divination as a part of your practice?
Absolutely, yes. So I do a couple of different things depending on people's cosmology, but at the end of every session, I do an oracle reading as well, and it usually ties up our conversation very nicely. Sometimes I'll use pendulum readings as well, depending on whether or not I'm able to do read the energy with my own body. If I'm unable to do that, I'll do the pendulum. Um, and I'm starting to learn how to do bone throwing. And so I'm excited to integrate that
Cool.
into my practice.
Love it. Oh, I love all this stuff because I do pendulum work myself. I'm a tarot card reader. I'm a psychic and also do mediumship. It's just all, to me, all this stuff's natural. That's why I started this podcast. So,
Yes,
um,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So, how do you see the role of divination in today's society, and how has it helped you personally in your journey?
Divination, I think, has always been a part of me since I was a kid. My mom was really into tarot. We would always visit like the local psychic. I remember being like 9 years old and being excited to go to the local medium. And then I got even more excited when I learned that this is just a part of who we are as a species, and
Yeah,
all of us can do this. And we don't have to necessarily give our power away to somebody to go and see what is in the stars for us in this moment, right? And so I oftentimes, when I'm looking for guidance and I'm not seeing the signs clearly, or I'm not feeling connected to spirit, I often will reach for my tarot cards or my oracle cards. If I'm looking for confirmation on, maybe because I'm very claircognizant, and I'm still working on the trust within myself,
yeah.
I often lean on the oracle cards. And so I also like for it to be, it's a very material way, or like a very it's not like I'm sitting there and channeling for someone, which I often do. It's a great way to show like, okay, now you pick a card, and I will read it straight out of the book, so that I'm not making this stuff up, right? And so it's a great way for them to feel validated in the things that they said and the things that I said and how the session went. And it's just a beautiful way to validate and to communicate with spirit.
Brilliant. Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. So it helps solidify the understanding of what's actually happening and also confirm it.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Now, you did mention that you are a Latina. Now, did you actually grow up in a Catholic faith?
Absolutely. Yes. In fact, I went to a Catholic school for 9 years, kindergarten through eighth grade, and I was the first woman altar server in my church.
Wow.
And so I got to learn a lot about the rituals and the type of incense and
Mm,
why we had certain cloths and certain things. And, I took a lot of that into my own practices. And it's like, oh, there's a reason why the Catholic Church uses frankincense and myrrh. It's like the strongest incense there is out there to be able to get all of the negative energies out of the space, right? And
yeah.
so yeah,
Mm.
I took a lot of the teachings there and made it my own.
Yeah, well, look, going to church is actually a magical experience if people really look at it carefully and, they're trying to kick out all the bad spirits which are trying to, get a hold of you and rule your life. And they're doing that with love, and they're trying to get people to realize that there is a path towards, enlightenment, which is, faith-based, and you can reach for divinity. That's actually a part of what your life is about. So I understand all that, and that's why I asked that, because I thought, well, you must have had been touched by that in some way. So I'm glad that's a part of your practice. Now, shamanic practices are often viewed as mystical and out of reach. And how do you make them yourself accessible and relevant to the everyday individual as a part of your work?
Yeah, I try to speak it in terms of like where they're at and from a developmental stage, right? So I'll give you like an example. I had one woman who's really spiritual, also grew up as a Catholic. And, she started to tell me all these things of how she felt like she had a lot of bad luck. Her husband had a lot of bad luck and all of these things. But I knew that for her, she would be okay with what we would call a limpia. A limpia is kind of like an egg cleanse on your body. You do it with rue plant, and it's something that's very indigenous in South America. But that's not for everybody, right? I have another woman who often comes to me. She would absolutely not be okay with that. And so I just simply, go with the Reiki, and then I start to kind of touch on some spiritual things, right? I plant my whole approach is I plant seeds, and if they ask more about it, then I'm a lot more open about it. If they don't ask about it, then I don't even go there or even try to convince them or even do anything, because I have to ask for permission to enter their energy. I have to ask for permission because we all have free will, right? And so if you come to me and you're not okay with a certain modality, then that's okay. I'm not going to try to impose it on you or even do it because you're not okay with it, and we all have free will.
Mm.
But I do have a lot of knowledge in a lot of different modalities. And so it's trying to figure out what you're comfortable with and trying to figure out what's going to be the best for your spirit, for your being, for your body.
Mm, mm. Do you work with people's higher selves as a part of that story? I mean, do you actually, like, if people aren't really saying all of the story, do you tap into their higher self and say, is this what they want? Do you,
Absolutely.
okay, all right. So how do you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I ask the question directly to them, and I also ask the question to their higher selves, their guides.
Yeah.
And I even one of the practices that I do for everyone is I bring them back in alignment to their higher self. So before we start, after we have the talk, but before we start any type of modality,
Mm,
a grounding meditation, which includes coming back to yourself and being in touch with your higher self or meeting your higher self for the first time. And
mm.
then oftentimes there's a lot more questions or there's a lot more interest in other types of modalities.
Yeah, right. So how do you deal with skeptics of all of this sort of stuff? I mean, obviously you're going to get some of those as well. I mean, not everyone gets attracted to the light for a life change. Some people are attracted to the light because they're just like, well, maybe I'm meant to be here, or their higher self has said, "Come along, this is where you got to be," and and they sit in front of you stone faced and like, "What am I here for?" What happens
Yeah.
then?
Yeah. So I've had a couple of those because, this work is not going to work. Just like therapy, it just doesn't
Mm.
work unless you're open to it. If somebody's making you be there, just like therapy, it's just not going to work because you're
Okay.
resisting, right?
Yeah.
I've had people buy gift cards from me. And literally, this one woman was like, came in and she sat with her arms crossed the entire time and like just question mark the entire time. And I did it because she wanted to please her friend and they paid for the service. But I knew in my heart of hearts that nothing was going to happen because she
Mm.
wasn't open to receiving it because you
Yeah.
have free will. And so
Yes.
if you're not ready for it, then nothing's going to happen.
Mm.
And so for me, my job is not to try to convince you. My job is to speak to what I know and to share my story with you and share how this affects other people and what the benefits could be. But if you're not ready for it, that's okay. And we don't have to share space, right? But if you are ready for it, then it can be a magical experience. I had this gentleman come in one time. He was fixing my internet and he was very skeptical. He's like, "So you do Reiki, huh? And you do this stuff." Like he's like, this is all a placebo effect. And I said, "You know what? It could be. It could be all a placebo effect. And if it is, so what? It helps people."
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, exactly.
if
Yeah,
it changes your perspective and it changes your life, who cares,
that's
right?
right. Yeah, yeah.
I don't think it's a placebo, but he thought it was a placebo, and I was accepting him in all his glory and what he was thinking, right? And where he was at from his developmental stage. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, man, like, and it felt like he wanted to try it, and it felt like he was interested, right?
Yeah.
And so I just try to be encouraging, and if somebody's trying to argue about it, I just don't go there. It's like this is what I do, and I try to explain it in the best of my ability at the stage that they're at. I'm not going to go into
Yes.
the 5D discussions, right? I'm going to
No.
go to like, where are you at, and let's start there.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to take them straight to ascension. They'll be like, "What? What are you talking about?" But yeah, no, it's good to actually yeah, meet people at their level, and the fact that you actually took that guy on the journey with the idea of placebo effect. I mean, just even the fact that placebo works in more often than not than actual things. Um, you could have just said that to him and said, "Well, look, placebo is proven to work, so I'm doing
Yeah.
placebo, but it works. So if it works, doesn't matter." Yeah, exactly, exactly. So all right. So when people come to you and they're a bit disconnected from their higher selves, and do you actually help them to recover that connection to move through their stuff?
Yeah, it depends on where they're at. Some people are so ingrained in their 3D lives, right? They don't even understand that there is a higher self, or they don't
Mm,
even understand that they are wounded. They just think that this anxiety, this depression, this suffering is just part of life. So I try to see where they're at. And then, for example, I know of a few clients that are not ready to meet their higher self. And so what I do is I do take them through the grounding exercise. I do take them through meeting their higher selves, but I don't necessarily say higher self, or I don't necessarily, you know what I mean? Like I try to tailor it per
mhm.
each person and plant that seed and give them a new perspective. And if they're open to it, then they'll be able to see it or feel it or have some sort of like, yeah, there was something there. Or, yeah, I feel a lot more whole. I feel a lot more connected. um, and some people, I'm able to take them through this whole journey in their meditation or in our session where they're able to be a lot more aligned and be able to understand like, yeah, there's a part of me, there's this soul part of me that I need to listen to as well. And there's like this difference between the ego and the higher self, and then there's me as well. So it just kind of depends, and it's always beautiful when people are able to recognize their higher selves and like want to engage more with their higher selves. I had this woman who said, yeah, I saw her. She was purple. She was like a light being, and she was just so far away. She's not ready to come meet me yet. And it was like, that's amazing, right? And then the next meditation, she was able to come closer. And then the third meditation, they were able to integrate and be one with each other. So those are all like that was one really beautiful experience that somebody had. And then some people are able to meet them right away. Some people it takes a few sessions. So
Right,
I don't
right.
know.
So you primarily work one on one with people, is that correct?
Yeah, primarily one on one. I do teach some courses like boundaries and I teach mediumship as well in group sessions. But when you purchase a course with me, you also get a one on one with me that's included in the course so that we can talk about either the material or practice, or if you need an energy healing session to remove blocks. I like to
Mm.
offer that because I don't know where people are at in their developmental stage when it comes to these big group sessions. So I like to offer the one on one so that I'm able to deepen their experience with those courses.
Right, right. Now, with your diverse knowledge from shamanic practices to Reiki, if someone were to start their journey towards inner peace today, and they didn't know anything about you, where would they start to do that? I mean, what was something you'd recommend, even if they didn't know you?
Even if they didn't know me, I would say explore in your area, like different things that are happening in your community. I mean, I know in my community there's like a lot of free sound bath sessions. Like having a sound bath can be an incredible and cathartic experience.
Yes.
You can look for yoga is really easy to find these days, but yoga might not be something that's for everyone. There are a
Mm.
lot of like breathwork classes online as well, right? And then if you're really ready to make the leap, you can find a local Reiki practitioner. Um, I will say every Reiki practitioner is different. So if you don't resonate with the first session, um, I would go ahead and try to book with somebody different. I also offer online Reiki sessions as well. I've had a few people come to me and say, I've had one or two other Reiki sessions and it wasn't like this. And then some people don't feel anything with me, and then they'll feel a lot with somebody else because we're sharing energy and I might not be for everyone. And so just like finding a good therapist, finding a Reiki practitioner, yoga instructor, breathwork instructor, I would say try it more than once. And, if the second or third time didn't work out, then maybe it's not for you, but there's so many other modalities out there. You can learn a lot more about it on Beyond Meditation podcast as well, where we cover a variety of different modalities that you can go ahead and try.
Excellent, excellent. Now, is there anything that I didn't discuss today that or any questions you were thinking of that you'd like me to ask, or any messages that you'd like to pass on to the listeners about life in general right now? Because there's a lot of stress with the world and how crazy it seems to be.
Yeah, I know that the one thing that I'd like to presence here is I know that it feels like there isn't any other way. Like whatever we've been doing so far is what works the best. But I do encourage you all to try to experiment, once a quarter with something new and see how that changes. Putting intentions out into the universe. If you want to get rid of anxiety, get rid of depression, it's definitely absolutely possible, whether it is with a traditional doctor or a therapist, but also pairing that with energy healing. Energy healing brings a little bit more of a holistic approach when you're pairing it with Eastern and Western medicine, right? It's not about all or nothing in terms of like switching. It's about, I myself have a therapist, a Reiki master, my own medical doctor, chiropractor, acupuncturist. Like I have a whole team of people because it brings about a more holistic, healthier living, rather than trying to keep on doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Exactly, that's right. Yeah, it's good to experiment and to learn and learn more about yourself as you are learning too, which is very good. So we're getting towards the end of the podcast. How can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm definitely on Instagram. So my handle is Crystaluna Vortex, all one word. I also have a website, www.krista-luna.com. You can also email me, jazzy at krista-luna.com. And I think I'm also on Facebook now. I'm coming back to Facebook slowly but surely, but I do have a page out there that you can follow. And I share all of my YouTubes and podcasts and info out there. I'm also on Patreon if you're looking to get more into the magical and manifesting rituals. I do a lot of ceremonies on there, and you can learn much, much deeper on my Patreon. Again, Crystalina Vortex.
Magical. Tell me more. What do you do? I mean, that's very interesting.
Yeah, so I do a lot of candle magic. Like right now, this month, I'm teaching candle magic. Last
Cool.
month, I taught mediumship to that group. I we do a lot of ceremony. So when Lionsgate comes about, we do ceremony. I do a retreat once a year for Patreon members to come out up in Yosemite. And we do a lot of drumming, a lot of manifestation, a lot of ritual, sitting in ceremony and a mediumship together. That there's something, you as a channeler know this, like when we're channeling by ourselves, it feels very powerful. But when you're channeling with a group of people,
Oh, it's
you're
massive.
also experiencing their gifts. And
Yeah.
it's absolutely magical. And so we have a really good group. It's a small and intimate group. And, I do quarterly boxes. So, like, for example, last month, we did a lot of ritual around Samhain or Samhain and Dia de los Muertos. And so I sent out a nice little box of like incense and candles that I made and herbs to dress your candles and just items for your altar and things like that. And I teach about like how to set up your altar and the types of altars. And I don't just do like Latin America stuff. I have some people that are of Celtic tradition. I'm very eclectic in that. Norris, like my husband is Norris, has a lot of ancestors that were Norris tradition, and he's a Viking, or his ancestors were Vikings. So I have a lot of knowledge on that as well. So it's very eclectic, and it's just kind of like, okay, what does spirit think that this group needs, and that's the information that I put out.
Very cool. So, do you have a newsletter as well that people can lock into so they can find out when all this stuff's happening, or it's just straight through the Patreon?
Both Patreon, and if you go to my website, you can sign up for my newsletter. I do send out something weekly where you can see some of the podcast that I put out, and as well as the things that are going on in Patreon.
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to subscribe to your podcast for sure. So,
Awesome.
I need to know more. I need to know more. This is cool. Thank you so much for your time, Jassy. This has been really, really interesting, and I love all the work that you're doing, and I'm sure that you're helping the world in just the right way and just the right time too.
Thank you. Thank you. It's such a pleasure sharing and to engage with your audience. Thank you for having me.
Okay, all right. Bye for now. That was a fun time talking to Jassy just then. I really enjoyed her understanding of the spiritual path and how people get led to it, and how sometimes that we might have some blind spots, and it's good to reach out and find a new way and to be open to learning. So, yeah, all power to her and her presence in this. It's really, really good to see. And we had some touching there upon her magical practices at the end. I could see how excited she got. So it was like, wow, wait a minute, we might have to do another podcast. So that may be coming up in the future. And I hope you've enjoyed the podcast today. And if you have anything that you'd like to share yourself, please reach out to me at supernormalized@proton.me. And I look forward to hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, please share the show to your friends and family. And if you really enjoyed Jassy's talk today as well, please reach out to her and tell her how much you enjoyed it. I'm sure she'd appreciate that too. All of her links will be in the show notes. And yeah, until next time, bye for now.